It's good to have you back on Global Business Report here on Arise News. A former Central Bank of Nigeria governor, Professor Chika Mbonu, said the total size of Nigerian banks' assets, which was 43.7 trillion naira, as at half-year 2019, was low compared to the banking sector in some other African countries. Soludo, who is a member of President Muhammadu Buhari's Economic Advisory Council, said this while speaking at the launch of the 2019 Nigerian banking sector report. CBN Governor Mr. Godwin Emefiele had disclosed plans to recapitalize the banks within the next 5 years to make them contribute significantly to economic growth. Soludo, in his speech, did not state the total value of assets he expected the banks to have, but he stressed the need for banks in the country to be able to finance large-ticket transactions on the continent. Meanwhile, Nigeria's rice farmers and millers who struggled in the past to sell their products are now smiling to the bank as Nigerians are forced to shift preference to local rice varieties. That is, according to reports. A rise in demand means the farmers and millers are now having to ramp up production to meet the ever-increasing demand. Nigeria closed parts of its borders in August to tackle smuggling of rice and other goods. Since then, demand has been up. Head of Customs confirmed last month that all trading goods via land borders had been halted indefinitely. Last week, the West African country, along with neighboring Benin and Niger, agreed to set up a joint border patrol force to tackle smuggling between the nations after a meeting between their foreign ministers. And Rise business analyst Chika Mbonu joins me now from our Abuja studios for more on this. Good to have you, Chika. Good morning. So let's start off with the Nigerian banks.
Good morning.
All right. So Nigeria has the largest economy measured by GDP. So how are Nigerian banks not the largest in Africa at this rate?
What a good question. For several reasons. Even at that, there's a report that is out there ranking the top 100 banks in Africa. And in that report, in the top 100 banks in Africa, Nigeria has 14 banks, and then South Africa has 8 banks. Egypt has 14 banks. But if we stretch that further as to the total asset of these banks in this top 100, South African banks, even though there are 8 and Nigeria is 14 banks, they contribute about 40% of the total assets of the top 100 banks in Africa. So your question is valid. If we have the highest GDP in Africa, why our banks are not the largest in Africa? But the first thing you want to know is this. Look at our economy. Look at our economy. Our economy is, driven by oil and gas. And then the next thing is that after oil and gas, what else? Every other segment of the economy is coming a far distant second. But look at the South African economy, initially built on, minerals and then agriculture, but have diversified in quantum leaps into manufacturing, transportation and other segments and even the financial systems. And so you find that on the size of the economy, on the diversification of the economy, Nigeria is nowhere compared to South Africa. You will find that the transactions in the oil and gas sector are limited compared to what happens in other segments of the economy. You just need to know that look at what's happening in Nigeria here. The top 3 or 4 companies in Nigeria are South African origin, and to let you know why that is happening. The other thing you look at also is that even though that our GDP is higher than South Africa's GDP, the parameter that you should actually look at is what they call the GDP per capita, basically which is GDP divided by the population. Nigeria is just about half of the GDP per capita of South Africa, and that can also tell you a lot of things. The other major issue is when banks were recapitalized in Nigeria to 25 billion, the exchange rate was about $1 to 130 naira. Look at what it is now, about $1 to 360 naira. So the growth in quantum terms in naira made by Nigerian banks have been, depreciated badly by the depreciation of our currency. So even if even though they're growing naira, by the time our currency is depreciating, you will find that the naira value is falling, and they can't rank very well with African banks.
Indeed, Chika. Now, what has been the experience of Nigerian banks in their forays in other parts of Africa?
Yeah, a couple of banks, Nigerian banks, have had branches. UBA has, I think, in 1920 African countries that are represented there. I think GTB has about 9 in 9 African countries. Access Bank, the new Access Bank, I think has about 7 or so on. First Bank, in that range also. Initially, a lot of them didn't understand the dynamics of these economies they were going out to, especially when they had to do with the labor laws and the regular legal environment for doing business in those countries. And in that way, some of them burnt their fingers. Indeed, East Africa presented more challenge than the West Africa, understandably, for most Nigerian banks, and a lot of them are struggling. So things are beginning to happen now. Some of them, the branches, some of the subsidiaries in Africa are returning to profitability, and a lot of the banks are pushing in now from almost near zero contribution to the profits of these Nigerian banks from Africa. Some of them now are contributing up to 10 to 20% of the total profit and total assets. So a lot of things are going to happen more now.
Indeed, based on the scenario you've just explained, how will the African Continental Free Trade Agreement impact banking in Africa, especially Nigerian banks at this rate? The African Continental Free Trade Area, bringing together 1.2 billion people, economies of that have GDP of 3.4 trillion. And a lot of reports have been pushed out there that says that in quantum terms, the business growth in Africa will multiply by about 52%. And then, of course, you allow for free trade between countries, which means that trade will grow. And consequentially, this will impact the banking business. And Nigerian banks especially will be able to tap into this new business opportunity, this One Africa concept, to grow their business. So it's good for the financial system, and Nigerian banks will profit from it. Indeed, Chika. Now, let's talk about rice production against the backdrop of the border closure. So do you think this is good news for Nigeria and local producers? What do you make of it?
We have always said that Nigerian businesses are suffering because of the smuggling issue from between our neighboring countries and Nigeria. We've said that in several fora. And we even put the custom people on the spot. And I'm wondering what they were doing to protect Nigerian businesses from these smuggling activities. Now, the border, of course, has been one solution towards stopping smuggling. And of course, it has had a salutary impact, understandably, of course, in the Nigerian production. So it's not surprising. You do know that rice, for example, from being a luxury food in the tables of many homes, has become a staple food in most homes now, up to the extent that very strong brands from Europe that came to Nigeria, for example, KFC, you know what KFC does in Europe, have been forced to alter their menu to include our popular Nigerian jollof rice. So also with some other brands that came in from South Africa who came here to do pizza only, and they found out that our palate doesn't just like pizza, we like our jollof rice, and that has happened. So rice is a very important staple food in the homes of Nigerians. And where the border is closed and the demand that's coming, the supply that's coming from outside is not here, Nigerians will be forced to make do with what they have, especially when we know that the local production, Nigerian total demand is estimated at about 7 million tons per annum. And the local production is about just about 5 million tons. So we still have that deficit. And what's happened now is that rice producers are encouraged now to expand their production. Those that have abandoned their mills before because it was unprofitable, and now are coming to do that. So yeah, it's good for the economy that's happening because the border has been closed and smuggling has been checked.
Indeed, Chika, we can't deny the staple status of rice. So what can the government do to sustain these positive developments?
Yeah, let's put it this way, that the border cannot remain closed. The goods produced in Nigeria must be have the right quality to be able to compete with any kind of product from around the world. One of the other aspects, factors will include the fact that a lot of these mills are operating under some limited conditions. There are issues with the value chain, there are issues with transportation, there are issues with even the capacity of the farmers. And most importantly, you know that one also, the infrastructural deficits in our country, like power. So all these issues, government must, face them and solve them to make sure that these rice millers become very competitive. In that way, the local price of this Nigerian produced rice will fall. You do recall that before the border closure, the typical bag, 50 kg bag of porridge rice was still about 13,500, 14,000 naira. Now, the price now has gone to more than double that. And the local rice is also chasing that new price. So we believe that the local millers must bring down this price to the prices before the border closures to enable us know that we have achieved something for the good of the country. If we have replaced imported rice with local rice that is very expensive, we have literally gained nothing for the economy.
Indeed, Chika. Now, apart from the gains on rice, what are the other impacts of the border closure? The other impacts, are a bit some negative. We tend to, not remember that there are so many economic activities happening inter-Africa, between Nigeria and our neighboring countries. Indeed, a lot of Nigerian companies, source their raw materials for their production from West African countries through land. This is not happening now. And when they put it in the vessels, the costs multiply. So that's a major problem. The fact that Nigerians depend on raw materials from some of these countries coming to Nigeria, they're not coming again. And of course, a lot of Nigerian businesses also export through the land borders. That's not happening again. If they put this on the vessels again, they become very uncompetitive. And government has to look at everything in totality to determine, before we shout, hurrah, we have succeeded. All right, Chika Mbonu, I'd like to thank you very much for your thoughts on those issues. Always a pleasure to have you.